Arrogant manager humiliates and insults company janitor, but the janitor responds seriously. "You're fired. Leave immediately." Robert was a simple man, 50 years old, whose calm gaze and meticulous gestures conveyed a serenity that few could ignore. He had started working as a janitor at a large company just over a month ago, and since then, his presence was felt in every detail of the environment. Robert treated each task with care, almost as if every cleaned corner were an extension of his own home. Humility and kindness, prominent traits of his personality, made him well liked by those who worked around him, even though he preferred to remain discreet. Although his posture did not seek attention, it was hard not to notice the diligence with which he performed his duties. He walked through the halls carrying buckets, mops, and cloths with the dignity of someone who understood the value of work, no matter what it was. When someone greeted him, Robert would respond with a sincere smile and mild words, always polite, but rarely expansive. He spoke little about himself, but his quiet presence was enough to inspire respect and silent admiration. In between occasional conversations, Robert mentioned that he was married and a father of 2, a fact that by itself piqued the curiosity of his colleagues. After all, why would a man of his age, with such a dignified and serene posture, accept such a humble job? When asked, he simply responded with humility that life's circumstances did not always allow for choices. Always discreet, he avoided delving into the reasons that led him to accept this work at his age, but his calm and secure demeanor inspired sympathy in everyone. Robert arrived early at the company that morning, as he did every day since he began working there. His punctuality was one of his trademarks, something he deeply valued. Upon entering through the side door, he greeted the first colleagues he met along the way. "Good morning, Brandon," he said with a smile to the security guard at the reception. "Good morning, Robert," Brandon replied, nodding his head. "Always punctual, huh?" Robert laughed softly. "There's no other way to start the day." As he walked toward the locker room, he crossed paths with Amanda from the administrative team. "Robert, good morning," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Good morning, Amanda," he replied. "I hope you have a peaceful day." After exchanging a few words, Robert entered the locker room, reserved for maintenance staff. He put on his immaculate blue uniform, adjusted the collar, and slipped into his non-slip shoes, which he always kept well cared for. He grabbed his bag and checked the items he would take for that day's work: cloths, mops, buckets, and the cleaning products he had organized the day before. Once ready, Robert pushed his cart with supplies down the main hallway where he would begin cleaning. The space was large, with porcelain floors that reflected the artificial light from the ceiling. He knew it was a high-traffic area, so he needed to be meticulous. Upon arrival, Robert took the yellow caution sign with the "Caution Wet Floor" warning and placed it strategically in the middle of the hallway, visible to anyone passing by. Patiently, he began the cleaning process. First, he dampened the floor with the cleaning solution he had prepared in the bucket. Then he mopped with precise movements, spreading the liquid evenly. The task was almost meditative for him, a moment where he allowed himself to focus on the present, putting aside external worries. A few minutes later, the sound of rapid footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by a loud and impatient voice. "I already told you I don't want any more excuses. Fix this immediately." It was Patrick, the manager, speaking on the phone with a tone that employees knew well. His arrogant voice cut through the air as he gestured with his free hand while balancing the phone between his ear and shoulder. Patrick was known for his authoritarian attitude and his habit of treating employees with disdain. Always impeccably dressed in sharp suits and shoes that shone, he made a point of maintaining an appearance that reinforced his position. However, his personality contrasted sharply with his polished appearance. He was impatient, frequently rude, and rarely acknowledged the efforts of others. For Patrick, hierarchy meant everything. Anyone below him deserved to be treated as inferior, and he made sure to make that clear. As he walked down the main hallway, Patrick held the phone firmly, speaking to someone on the other end in a clearly agitated tone. His face was contorted with irritation, and his gestures with the free hand seemed to emphasize every word. The intensity of his voice echoed off the walls, even without being able to hear exactly what he was saying. Nearby employees quickly looked away and hurried along, fearing becoming the next target of his fury, something that many had experienced before. Patrick abruptly finished the call, hanging up with an irritated gesture. He shook his head and muttered something inaudible, clearly frustrated. His eyes scanned the hallway ahead, but he seemed oblivious to what was actually happening around him. He adjusted his wristwatch, took a deep breath, and continued walking with long strides, determined to reach his next appointment. Then, without noticing the yellow caution sign indicating "Caution, wet floor," he stepped on the still wet floor. His shoe slid abruptly, and, unable to regain his balance, he fell heavily to the ground. The sound of the fall echoed through the hallway, followed by the noise of papers flying from his hand and scattering around him. For a moment, the hallway fell silent as the few employees present tried to process what they had just witnessed. The tension was broken by muffled laughter. Sophia, from accounting, covered her mouth with one hand, but her eyes betrayed how much she found the scene amusing. Next to her, Richard, from logistics, turned his back, trying to stifle a laugh, but his trembling shoulder betrayed his struggle to contain it. Robert, who had witnessed everything, put the mop aside and quickly walked toward Patrick. His expression was one of genuine concern. He bent down and extended his hand to help the manager up. "Mr. Patrick, are you all right?" he asked in a soft, attentive voice. Patrick, still sitting on the ground, first looked at the scattered papers and then at the employees laughing. His expression turned dark, filled with anger. He began to get up on his own, ignoring Robert's outstretched hand. "You two there!" He pointed at Sophia and Richard with a rigid finger and eyes that seemed to burn with fury. "If I hear one more sound from you, you'll find out what happens when you piss me off." Both flinched under Patrick's sharp gaze. Sophia quickly shook her head, while Richard murmured something inaudible, avoiding any direct confrontation. Both quickly looked away and returned to work, trying to disappear from Patrick's sight. Once he ensured no one else was laughing, Patrick slowly turned to Robert. His eyes were hard, almost sparking with anger as he looked at the janitor. "You," he began in a low voice filled with venom, "what do you think you're doing here?" Patrick took another step forward, reducing the distance between them. His eyes were fixed on Robert, as if he wanted to intimidate him with just his gaze. Robert, still calm, replied serenely, "I'm doing my job, sir." "My job?" Patrick repeated, almost spitting the words. He let out a short, dry laugh full of disdain. "Oh, so that's what you call a job? Spreading water on the floor to make others fall, because, from what I just saw, you're not good at anything else." Robert remained silent, his expression calm, but inside he felt the weight of the words. He knew that, regardless of what he said, Patrick was determined to vent his anger. "I fell on the floor in the middle of the main hallway because of you," Patrick shouted, pointing to the spot where he had fallen. His voice was so loud it echoed, drawing the attention of more employees who discreetly stopped to watch. "Do you know what that means? You put my safety at risk. I could have seriously hurt myself." "Sir, the sign was visible," Robert explained carefully, trying to avoid further conflict. He pointed to the yellow sign, still in the same place. "I placed it there to alert everyone about the wet floor." "Visible," Patrick repeated with a mocking tone. "You think putting up a little sign solves everything?" He kicked the sign, which slid a few meters to the side, and turned back to Robert. "That's an excuse, a useless piece of plastic. Is this how you try to justify your incompetence?" Robert remained firm, but he started feeling the eyes of those around him. He knew everyone was hearing every word Patrick said, but he chose not to react. "Do you know who I am?" Patrick continued, leaning slightly forward as if he wanted to confront Robert physically. "I'm the manager of this company, and do you know what that means? It means I don't have time to deal with idiots who can't even do the basics, not even clean a floor without causing problems." Murmurs began to grow among the employees, but no one dared to intervene. Patrick briefly looked at the group of people watching the scene. "You too!" he shouted. "Don't you have anything else to do? Want a laugh, is that it? Get back to work before I send everyone home." The employees quickly dispersed. Though they still glanced back at Robert and Patrick, the hallway became emptier, but the tension lingered in the air. Patrick turned his attention back to Robert, crossing his arms and looking him up and down with contempt. "Look at you," he said, his voice full of sarcasm. "A man your age, doing a job any 18-year-old kid could do better. What happened? Did you lose all other opportunities in life and end up here?" Robert took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "I'm here because it's a dignified job, sir." "Dignified?" Patrick laughed again, this time louder. "Dignified? There's nothing dignified about someone like you. You think you're helping this company? The only thing you're doing is slowing its progress." Robert looked at him without saying anything, but the impact of the words was clear. Patrick noticed this and took the opportunity to escalate the attack. "You're pathetic," Patrick continued. "A janitor who can't even clean properly. And to top it off, you still try to give me moral lessons with this humble attitude. No one here cares about what you think, because no one cares about you." At that moment, Patrick began walking around Robert as if inspecting him. "You must be here to pick up any crumbs they throw your way, right? That's all you deserve. People like you don't belong in a company like this. You should be grateful you haven't been fired yet." Robert lowered his eyes for a moment, but then he looked up again to face Patrick. His posture remained calm, though inside he felt a mixture of humiliation and frustration. "Are you going to say something, or will you keep standing there, silent like a coward?" Patrick taunted, stepping closer again. "Or maybe you think you're above criticism, huh? You think your miserable life can't get worse?" "I didn't want to cause any problems, sir," Robert finally responded, his tone firm but controlled. "I'm just doing my job." "My job?" Patrick repeated, raising his voice even more. "Your job is to obey me, to do what I tell you. And if I want you to clean this floor again, even though it's already clean, you'll do it, because that's what you are. A simple janitor, a nobody." The words echoed down the hallway, and Robert noticed that some employees who had previously dispersed were now standing silently further down, watching again. Patrick raised his hand and pointed at Robert's cleaning cart. "Look at this. Buckets, mops, cloths. Is this your life? Aren't you ashamed? Don't you ever think about what your kids must think of you?" He laughed, as though he had just said the funniest thing in the world. That last sentence hit Robert like a blow. He felt his heart tighten, but he decided not to respond. Patrick noticed the reaction and smiled arrogantly, as if he had won. "I'll make sure the owner knows about this," Patrick said, walking back and forth, still gesturing. "And rest assured, Robert, after today, you won't be here anymore. It's high time we put someone competent in your place." Robert remained silent for a few seconds, staring at Patrick with a look that, though still calm on the surface, held something deeper. He sighed, as if carrying a burden for a long time, and knowing this moment was inevitable. "I wanted to hide this for a bit longer," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "But I guess now I won't be able to." Patrick furrowed his brow, intrigued and suspicious. "Hide what?" he asked, crossing his arms, trying to maintain his authoritative stance, though his voice showed a hint of doubt. Robert looked up at Patrick, and his expression changed. The humble, submissive demeanor he had maintained until that moment was replaced by something serious, even threatening. His voice grew firmer, carrying an unexpected authority. I was waiting for a chance to resolve this another way, he began, taking a step forward as Patrick took a slight step back. But unfortunately, you didn't leave me a choice. Patrick looked around, now more confused than angry. What are you talking about? Resolve. Resolve what? He asked, stammering slightly, trying to hold on to his composure. Robert fixed his gaze on Patrick's eyes and spoke clearly. Patrick, you're fired. For a moment, the hallway fell completely silent. Patrick blinked, as though he hadn't heard correctly. What? He asked, letting out an incredulous laugh. I'm fired? By who, you? A janitor? Have you lost your mind? Robert ignored the sarcasm and continued, now with an even more serious tone. Pack your things and leave immediately. There's no more room in this company for someone like you. You must be kidding me, Patrick shouted, pointing a finger at Robert. You don't have the authority for this. I'm the manager here, you miserable bastard. Who do you think you are? Robert didn't move. He crossed his arms and answered, his calm now laced with authority. I'm the owner's brother, he said slowly, letting each word sink into the silence around them. My brother is facing serious health issues, and he invited me to take over leadership of this company in his place. But I chose to come in low, in a simple position, to understand how everything really works here. I wanted to get to know the people, the dynamics, and the issues that might never reach the leadership offices. And Patrick, today you showed me exactly why that decision was so important. You are the embodiment of everything that needs to change. Patrick's eyes widened and he took a step back. The what? You, the owner's brother? He laughed, but the sound was empty, full of disbelief. This is impossible. You, cleaning floors, and now you want to convince me you own all of this? Is this some kind of ridiculous joke? Robert, without changing his expression, took another step forward, his posture imposing, almost intimidating. No, Patrick, this is not a joke. This is very serious. And you should have thought more carefully before turning this place into an environment of fear and humiliation. What you did today is unacceptable, but from what I've seen and heard over the past few months, this wasn't the first time. Patrick furrowed his brow, trying to regain control of the situation. You don't know anything about me or how I run things here. I've made tough decisions, made sacrifices, and now you show up pretending to be someone to destroy everything? Robert looked at Patrick with an intensity that made the manager look away for a moment. Do you think shouting and humiliating people are sacrifices? Do you really believe that the fear you inspire is a sign of leadership? You have no idea what it means to build something for real, Patrick. Because if you did, you would treat everyone here as a key part of what we're trying to achieve. Instead, you belittle them to make yourself feel bigger. Patrick opened his mouth to retort, but Robert interrupted him, raising his voice a bit with firmness. And do you know what's worse? You had opportunities to change, several of them. I've heard reports. Employees came to me, even without knowing who I really was, begging for someone to step in. But I wanted to give you a chance. I waited to see if you would have the decency to learn from your mistakes. But today, you showed me there's nothing left to wait for. You can't do this, Patrick shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Robert. I'm the manager. I know this company better than anyone. You have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, Robert replied, his voice sharp as a blade. I'm removing the problem. This is absurd, Patrick exclaimed, his voice full of panic and anger. This company needs me. Robert shook his head slowly, as though considering Patrick's words. Then he spoke, his tone firm and final. This company needs leaders, Patrick, and leaders don't terrorize their teams. Leaders inspire. They listen, they build, they unite. All you've done is divide, and now it's over. Patrick, now visibly shaken, looked around for support, but the looks of employees who had once feared him were now filled with relief and even satisfaction. "Aren't you going to say anything?" he shouted, desperate. "You know how much I've done for this company. I've kept it running." One of the older employees, Justin, stepped forward, crossing his arms. "You kept things running at the cost of fear, Patrick, and that's not leadership. If you're really leaving, don't expect anyone to miss you." Patrick looked like he was about to explode, but Robert cut off any response. "Enough. Pack your things and leave now. I don't want to hear another word from you." Patrick hesitated, as though still not believing what was happening. But, realizing there was no way out, he hastily gathered his things. "You'll regret this," he muttered as he headed for the door. "You'll see." "We've seen enough," Robert replied, watching Patrick leave for the last time. When the manager finally disappeared, Robert turned to the employees still gathered in the hallway. "I want you all to know," he began, his voice now calm but still firm, "that what happened today marks the beginning of a change. This company will be a place of respect, where no one will ever be treated the way you've been treated here. Everyone has value, and I want to make sure you feel that every day." The silence was broken by spontaneous applause from some employees, followed by murmurs of relief and approval. Amanda, who had witnessed everything, said, "Thank you, Mr. Robert. What you did today was necessary." Robert nodded. "You don't have to thank me. Just be part of this change. Let's work together to make this place the best it can be." In the following days, Robert officially assumed his role as the company's president, making it clear that leadership would be marked by respect, fairness, and humanity. Despite his new position, he never abandoned the simplicity that defined him. He continued greeting each employee with the same kindness and friendship he had cultivated while working as a janitor. Robert made sure to remind everyone that his role didn't make him superior, but rather responsible for ensuring that everyone had the conditions needed to work in harmony. With the support of his team, Robert initiated a series of significant changes. The first was the creation of an internal committee dedicated to communication and employee well-being. This committee was responsible for organizing regular meetings where each department had the opportunity to voice their concerns, suggestions, and ideas. "The foundation of any company is to listen to those who build it every day," Robert often said, emphasizing the importance of giving everyone a voice. Additionally, Robert implemented anonymous channels for employees to report problems, such as inappropriate behavior or difficulties in work processes, without fear of retaliation. These reports were taken seriously, and measures were implemented transparently to ensure that each case was handled fairly. Another crucial change was the overhaul of leadership and management training. Robert brought in consultants specializing in humanized leadership to teach that a team's success depended on trust, respect, and collaboration. Those who previously adopted authoritarian attitudes were encouraged to reflect on their practices, and in some cases were reassigned to roles more suited to their profiles. "Leadership is about inspiring, not controlling," Robert emphasized during the first training. Robert also restructured the recognition policies. He implemented programs that highlighted not only employee performance, but also the positive impact each person brought to the team. Employees were publicly praised for their contributions, and symbolic awards were created to motivate everyone to work with even greater enthusiasm. Additionally, he reviewed the working conditions. Salaries were adjusted more fairly, benefits were expanded, and new communal spaces were created, providing areas for rest and interaction. He made it a point to visit these areas regularly, speaking with employees, as he always had, reinforcing the idea that every person, regardless of position, was an essential part of the company's success. Over the months, the company thrived like never before. Clients and partners noticed the change in the environment and work quality, and many felt inspired by Robert's leadership. More than financial results, the greatest triumph was the creation of a corporate culture based on respect and collaboration. In the end, Robert proved that leadership was not defined by positions or titles, but by the ability to inspire and value people. Under his guidance, the company became more than a workplace. It became a community where everyone felt seen, heard, and valued. And so, the man who started by cleaning hallways showed that true greatness lies in humility and respect, teaching that every person, regardless of position, can make a difference when treated with dignity. Under his leadership, the company not only grew, but also became an example of how success is built on humanity and teamwork. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.